Welcome to LendAPI Academy. My name is Kay, and this is episode 1 in our Rules and Decision series. In this series, we're going to be diving deep into the Rules Studio as well as our pricing engine and showing you some of the cool products that you can build utilizing these features and functionalities. To get started, what I want to do is I want to leverage and show you how powerful our decision trees and pricing engines can be and build one of the more complex lending products. So I'm going to go ahead and build a mortgage underwriting product. Mortgages are synonymously one of the more complex underwriting and risk models in the lending world. The sheer number of variables to sift through can be a little daunting and overwhelming. But what we want to do is I want to showcase all of the different features and functionalities within Rules Studio and Pricing Engine to build out a simple mortgage application. So I went ahead and actually started to build out a loan application in our product studio, and let's go through it. You'll see in our product studio we have a few different tabs ready to use. Starting with borrower information, we're asking for a few different pieces of common information that you would see in the first step of applying for a mortgage, from first and last name to credit score, social security number, marital status, date of birth, and of course, this being a mortgage and such a large loan amount, we do also ask if you have a co-borrower. All of this is leveraging some new variables that we created. The variables that we're leveraging for this particular series is starting with the PL prefix. So following our LendAPI standards, it's important whenever you release a new product to make sure that you are leveraging the correct variable naming schemes so that you don't lose any work or mix up different variables as you start to build out your product. So utilizing the PL prefix, everything in our mortgage loan application will leverage this. Following that, we are going to be going through a few more pieces of information and intakes to make sure that the pre-qualification step for this mortgage application is sufficient. So we're going to be asking for things such as property information, employment information, and then co-borrower information, and of course financial information. So you'll notice that we are leveraging a few different key pieces here. And this is all to get us started in our pre-approval process. This is just to get us to a loan amount as well as an interest rate. So with that being said, the first thing I want to do is actually tackle something very simple, which is our co-borrower flow. So this particular instance is not going to apply to everyone. Some people are going to be applying for borrowers as themselves. Others will be leveraging a co-borrower to help boost their approval. So in order to make sure that we show this particular flow dynamically, we're actually going to be utilizing our decision engine to help us trigger the next steps. So you'll notice that decision engine is very powerful in this aspect and very versatile. So you'll see on the first page, we do ask, if you have a co-borrower, and this is a Boolean, yes or no question, of course, if you select no, you'll just go through the rest of the information from property to employment to financial information. And of course, if you do, we do want to showcase the co-borrower tab before navigating through the rest of the flow. So let's go ahead and write a rule to do that. So what I'll do is I'll navigate to the Rule Studio and create a new decision tree just to help me filter through the application tabs. And we'll call this the co-borrower flow. And this is to help collect information. With that, we are in our first branch of our decision tree in the Rule Studio. So I'll start to create some nodes to get us to the right access. So of course, it is important to always make sure before you leverage anything in Rule Studio to get all your variables in place, but also your decision outcomes. So let's go ahead and do that real quickly as well. Just because you have some decision outcomes does not necessarily mean they are going to trigger that exact set of information. So approval outcomes don't always mean that it's going to trigger an approval. It can simply be another outcome or another step. You have to understand that LendAPI has 4 direct decision outcomes for you to leverage, and each of them serve a different purpose. The approval outcome is the most commonly used if you want to trigger another page, another step, and not close out the decision tree at that point. Whereas the decline outcome is usually leveraged to stop someone in their tracks. And then, of course, review and requested documentation are the pending outcomes, if you will. These are really leveraged more so to help sort of draw the application to a natural step so that it can continue at a later state. So if you need manual review or need to have some sort of intervention, review and request docs are the way to go. For us, because it is a pretty simple logic, we're going to leverage our approve outcome and we're going to name this co-borrower approved. And this is to just set us up for the first page, or I should say, if there is a co-borrower. And then I want to set up another approval account outcome to say no co-borrower. And of course, both of these don't necessarily mean that a user is going to get stopped in their tracks. It just simply says whether or not you have a co-borrower or not. So no co-borrower. Logic. Okay. Now that we have our 2 approved outcomes ready to go, let's navigate back to our decision tree and start to create. So this logic should be very simple. We're going to leverage the co-borrower Boolean and we are going to be utilizing that to actually trigger the rule. So the co-borrower Boolean is right here, and then you'll see that when you utilize a Boolean into your decision tree, your actual logic or decisioning is limited because it is obviously a binary choice. So it is equal to or not equal to. For us, obviously, it is going to be is equal to, which is a true statement, in which case, in this instance, it means yes, they have a co-borrower. And let's save this rule. And now let's decide what happens next. So if they do have a co-borrower in this instance, we should set them to the co-borrower page flow. And this actually just triggers an action at that point. And then you'll see this is the action, and we are triggering the approved action, and we're triggering the co-borrower approval. And of course, if they do not have a co-borrower, then we'll just do the borrower flow. Of course, this is not, again, this is not a decline of any instance. This is simply just a filter to see which route a user would take. So in this instance, we are going to set this as a no co-borrower and save this decision tree. Let's test our tree and make sure that this is giving us the right instance. So you'll see we've saved the tree, we've saved all the outcomes. Let's test it. Has co-borrower? Yes, no. Yes, approved, perfect. And then of course no, also approved, but the outcome is in a different node. So let's just take a look and make sure these instances are correct. All right, I think we're good to go. Let's go through and start testing. So for this particular tree, I think we're good to go. We can actually start to generate this. So in this instance, I will say ready for flow, and let's submit this for approval. So always remember that in our decision engine, there is an extra step added for approval, and this is just to add in an extra layer of security and risk compliance so that rules and decisions and risk models are not just published without a check and balance system in place. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, the only person that can actually approve a decision tree is an admin in the LendAPI instance. So if you have auditors or people on your risk team that you want to approve or overview your decision trees, make sure you add them as admins. All right, so we are good. Let's approve. Looks good. Now let's implement it into our product studio. So navigating back to our mortgage loan, you'll see we are going to be utilizing the co-borrower flow in our decision tree. You'll see I did select a multi-decision tree or multi-product for this particular flow. There is no definitive answer. The multi-product is really utilized if you want to trigger multiple offers or if you want to run multiple decision trees. For us here, in this instance, because it is a mortgage loan, even as complex it is, you do not need to select a multi-product. You can utilize a simple single product and get the same results, because all of these different pieces of information is going to run through one continuous decision tree. So we are not going to be splitting into multiple decision trees or multiple code trees. to run one flow. So with that being said, we've set the co-borrower flow for this page, the borrower page, and now, of course, we get to see what the decisions are. And you'll see, because I set 2 actions here, and both actions are approved, I actually get to set what the approval next steps are. And this is one of the more clever ways to trigger different tabs and filtering systems. Of course, there are multiple ways to do so here at LendAPI because the product is so dynamic, but this is one of my favorite steps to leverage. So of course, if they do have a co-borrower, we want to take them to the co-borrower information. And of course, if they do not, we go ahead and take them directly to property information. And let's save this logic. Perfect. And let's test the rest of the application. But before we do, let's make sure that this particular flow has all of these steps in place. So after property information, it is going to be employment type. And save the form. And then after employment is going to be financial information. As we save, and then of course financial information is going to be the last step. But one other step before we leave this flow is and test it is what happens after you navigate through the co-borrower flow. Well, the next logical step is actually to go through the property information. Again, this page is just an additional page to enter another set of borrower or a co-signer, if you will, in your mortgage flow. So you want to make sure this instance is saved, and then of course financial information is our last step. And let's just review the logic one more time to make sure that all these different steps and filters are connected, and they look like they are. So let's go ahead and test this. So I'm going to go ahead and publish. And of course, always preview and make sure your fields and your tabs are looking correct. But I think we're ready to test, and we're just going to do our version 1 test here. And we're simply testing to make sure the co-borrower logic is in place. So if you remember correctly, navigating back to Product Studio, and you'll see here under URL, this is one of the ways to test your product. So let's go ahead and do that. And we are greeted by our first page of our application. Of course, right now, there's no other logic really set in place for this application, so we're going to go ahead and just navigate through and just make sure that that co-borrower information is in place. So let's try the test case where we do select yes, there is a co-borrower, and see if it takes us. It does. It takes us to the first co-borrower step. So let's go ahead and fill in our co-borrower information and make sure that the rest of the flow looks good. So after this page should take us to the property information page, and voila, we are here. And then I think the rest of the application should flow fairly synchronously. And then of course, the last page is our financial information. All right. and we're simply putting in test numbers, so there's no logic tied to here. And you'll see that because we don't have an actual rule set in this page, right now this is just going to be a spinner. But at least our CoLogic rules are working. So with that, let's go back. And let's test it again. In this instance, we're going to test it where we do not set the co-borrower logic, and see what we get, utilizing as much of the same information as possible. And then in this instance, we're going to select no and click continue. And we are actually taken to the property information, skipping the co-borrower information. So in this instance, this logic and decision tree is working perfectly. With that, we've created the first in a chain of decision and rule studios for this particular product. So please come back and continue the rest of the series with me, where I will show you how to build different decision trees as well as child trees for in both the Rule Studio as well as a pricing engine, and make sure that you have the most complex and versatile products readily available to use. And as always, remember to follow and subscribe to our page for more content on LendAPI Academy. Thank you, and cheers.